Okay. So thank you, Susan, for the kind introduction. As you know, I just graduated from my PhD program at UPT Geography and Planning. So my focus has always been urban planning. So initially, I'm more on the engineering/architecture perspective, doing a lot of like urban design, infrastructure planning, land use planning, master plans, like very technical work. And then later in my master here in urban planning, it's stronger focus on public policy, urban development, still have very much of emphasis on urban form and like built environment in general. In my PhD, somehow I try to be more macro level of thinking. So I focused on this very interesting topic on aging and also aging in place. So that's combining a lot of disciplines that I previously have not developed that much knowledge on. So one is on aging. Actually, I gained most of my knowledge here at the Institute of Aging and Life course. So I joined the gerontology courses and also learned a lot of series about aging and aging well. And also I did a collaborative program with School of Environment, so environment and health. So that's more on the what's like healthy aging. Like that's also a big supplement to my own knowledge. But still, because I'm really from a different academic background, and I would really appreciate your input and also like your suggestions towards this research. So this presentation is going to be a brief, not introduction, but like brief overview of my doctoral research. It's entitled A Good Place to Age in Place, Exploring Relationships Between the Built Environment, Activity Participation, and Healthy Aging. And because it's such an overarching big topic, so here I'm really just picking some of the interesting findings or some findings I find interesting, and also hopefully I can like stir some discussions. So as you probably like as everyone knows here, Canada right now is like officially an aging society. So in the 2016 census, it shows the Canadian seniors now, it's like first time in history outnumbered children. And also, if you take a look at the nice graph of the from Statistics Canada, that's showing the population pyramid change from the like dark blue line here, 1971, to the yellow area here, that's 2011. So that's how significant the population aging is in Canada. So by definition, population aging usually refers to the increase in median age or the increase of the proportion of the elderly, and usually defined as people who would be on the working age and 65 and over. So right now, based on the population trend, it's quite clear that the majority of the population is already in the middle age. And then in the next few years or so, so right now you see a peak around 55, like 50 to 55-ish. And we would expect this group of population gradually to the 60s, to the 70s, and even older. So there are a lot of drivers for population aging. There will be such as no fertility rates, longer life expectancy, out migration of younger people from some places, immigration of older people to some places, and also like the vast majority are just aging in place. And that's the part I'll be focused on in this talk. So can I see your hands if you heard the term aging in place, or you think, okay, that's really the majority. So that's kind of different from the experience I had if I do a presentation in geography or planning. Like I would say maybe even 50% would not really heard of this term aging in place. And so this term has very widely used in policy frameworks, and sometimes they use slightly different interpretation. But like in the very general public understanding that means that older adults being able to remain in their own homes or communities as they age. So it's really a strong emphasis on the capability to stay where they want to. So in Canada, according to StatsCan, the different living arrangements of older adults. So in 2011, there are more than 90% of older adults 65 years and older living in private dwellings. So that meaning that's like private homes, like your own homes, outside of institutions, collective dwellings, or band housing. But however, the number of the oldest old, so by definition here is 85 and over, are living collective dwellings, that the growth is by 23% from 2011 to 2016. So we do see this strong demand for more of an elderly friendly environment or elderly friendly communities. So that also shows, even though we emphasize the ability for people to stay where they are, where they have lived for so many years, they are in this case, it's kind of reflecting that they are not enough of those support for people to age in place. So before I start just diving into my research, I did kind of systematic literature review and then really digging into what in academic literature people conceptualize aging in place. So I did a little chart comparing the different interpretations and also comparing how this idea has changed or evolved over time. So here, in very, very early literature, there's a strong emphasis on deinstitutionalization. So at that time, there's a strong stigma against institutions. So basically saying it's not the ideal environment for elderly, and then we should be able to just age outside of those institutions. So also there's a famous planning literature at the time about aging inside or outside the wall. So what kind of places, what kind of options do you have, and whether people were able to age outside of the wall, quote unquote. But also later on, the emphasis moved towards more of a independent living. So instead of saying the either inside or outside the wall, this stronger emphasis saying you stay in a community and then independently. So living with certain support, but still remain your own autonomy, privacy in this built environment. And later on, especially from the WHO's report about active aging and age-friendly communities, those policy framework come into public knowledge, there is stronger emphasis on the supportive environment, and both in terms of physical environment and also social environment. And also research also takes a stronger focus on the interaction between people and the environment. So in some of the more recent literature, this also emphasizes on broadening the concept of aging in place, and especially there is interest in studying what kind of assisted living environment or assistive technologies that can help or support people to leave the neighborhood or the living environment they want to. And also with this trend of changing conceptualization or focus on aging in place, there are other concepts that are interrelated and also adding on to this concept. So sometimes people use interchangeably aging in place and aging in community. And also with a stronger emphasis on the environment side, there is the concept of age-friendly communities that's kind of putting a guideline towards what kind of environment do we expect, what kind of environment we can consider that as age-friendly and that can support aging in place. So aging in place, as my research topic, it is really multidisciplinary by nature. So in demography, gerontology, public health, there are already been a lot of research, both series and also empirical research, have provided a lot of very useful series and methods to study aging and the concept of age well. But however, as I reviewed most of the different literature in the different disciplines, I do notice a large part of it doesn't really consider that much about space, spatial context, and also what's really the place of aging in place. I think that's a big research gap that I found. And however, for me as more of an urban planner and also in this field, focusing on land use planning, urban design on a very practical side, there is a strong legacy of modernism that has very limited discussion about population aging. So modernism, especially on like in architecture, as you can see the little graph over here, that's a very influential architect's like diagram about like human scale. So in this diagram, and in the very early time when people were starting to lay out like building codes, zoning bylaws, these different policies that shape our built environment, it's kind of envisioning there is a standard human there, and then there's like scale according to this human, and then there'll be like a sidewalk 1.5 meters wide, etc. And then so those very standard engineering and also architecture urban planning policies in place, that's actually shaping the current built environment to be not age friendly in many cases. And also, even in the discipline of urban planning for so many years, is very limited discussion on population aging. So the focus mostly is on the normative series on good urban form. So if you come across some of the planning literature, there has been a lot of discussion on, say, new urbanism, compact development, like where we would direct growth to, and there's also strong debates against suburbanization about like how to accommodate growth, accommodate infrastructure, accommodate like services for these growing populations. And there's also more and more on walkable, livable, and inclusive urban environment. But however, population aging is kind of embedded into this like grand schemes. But very few of the existing, especially theoretical empirical work, like focus on aging in place per se. So some of the knowledge gaps that I came to my mind when I review this different this literature from different disciplines are like, on one side there's a strong vision of age-friendly cities that's mainly led by the WHO reports and also some policy documents in urban planning that strongly emphasize this walkable neighborhood with transit services, and also emphasize the association between walking and the physical mental health. So that's been the main policy goals and policy frameworks envisioned in most like planning documents on aging in place or age-friendly communities. But on the other side, especially in some of the gerontology literature that I came across, there's a strong emphasis on like driving and quality of life, especially kind of arguing that driving session and will have a strong impact on the decreased health and well-being. So my reflection on those knowledge gap is, on one side, for the planning visions, there's not an acknowledgement of the context of aging in place, and especially in like large North American like cities, suburbs, rural areas, where the built environment that are dominated by the system of automobility. So basically, without changing the built environment, most people are car dependent. It's very difficult to move around, and also with the current financial constraints from municipalities and different levels of government, this vision of walkable neighborhood, transit-friendly communities are actually not feasible to be applied across Canada, for example. But then the trade-off will be, do we just move people to what we think as more age-friendly communities, or do we just apply, like devote this limited financial resources to certain selected communities? So either way, it will be very difficult discussion that people do not pay much attention to. And also on the other side, for the vision of independent lifestyle and aging, there's really an unclear relationship between healthy and active aging and automobility. So on the one side, active lifestyle are reported to be closely related to healthy aging and active aging. But also without a car in this automobile dependent built environment, whether there's actually stronger effect that kind of decreasing people's health and well-being. And also, usually those literature does not address that the system of automobility disadvantages certain groups of older adults, and especially older adults who can no longer drive because of chronic disease or because of disability and etc. So these social inequalities usually not addressed in this vision of independent lifestyle in the aging process. So my objectives kind of in twofolds. So one is to understand the contextual differences of aging in place. So how different they are, how comparable they are. So it's just to address, so what are the places we're talking about when we talk about aging in place? So for that, I'm conducting a more of a macro level analysis with a fragment spatial level of analysis. And I'm focused on some kind of general patterns, looking at the variations and typologies. And the second part is to explore the travel behavior and activity participation among aging populations over the life course. So how do they change over the life course, and how do they differ between especially different groups such as males and females, car users and non-car users. So I try to adopt this life course perspective in empirical analysis that has not been widely used in especially transportation and planning studies. So like the rest part, I'll just go through some of the research questions and some of the key findings, arguments, and show you some of the examples from my research. And feel free to stop me at any time, like if you want clarity, if you have a different point of view, I'm like, it's more than welcome to receive comments and suggestions. So the first part of my question is how to analyze aging in relation to place. So how to understand the spatial patterns of aging. So some of my key arguments from that is, so first, the multiple demographic trends need to be considered simultaneously. Instead of right now, we usually use one single indicator to say whether, like say, one municipality or one place is aged significantly. And also there different types of aging community can be identified with a combination of simple measures. And there is no clear linear relationship between population aging and population decline or moving. So here is a map at the CSD level, that's something equivalent to the municipality level across Canada. So that's the kind of standard indicator what we use is a median age, indicating how aged each place or each municipality is. So you can see from the map, this place is highlighted with the red boundaries are metropolitan areas. So according to this map, most of the metropolitan areas are close to like on the younger side, at the younger end edge. And there are so parts of BC, like mid to North Ontario and the maritime provinces, and also some part of Saskatchewan and Manitoba are like more significant, like aged more substantially than other parts of Canada. However, if you use a different indicator of population aging, say if I want to map the population of aged people, like of older adults, and then those metropolitan areas like will stand out significantly. So that also gives the question, how comparable are those places? Like when you use a single indicator to understand the population structure and population aging. And it's particularly difficult in Canada because of the highly uneven population distribution and also highly uneven population growth. Because if you know the growth trends in Canada, the GTA almost take about more than 35% of the total population growth in Canada. Then how do we really compare different places across Canada, and then how do we understand the aging policies implications in those different places? And also zooming in, even within metropolitan areas, there are a lot of heterogeneity in those places. So here are the 3 maps at the dissemination area level, which is slightly smaller than what we usually consider as a neighborhood. So it's like a proxy of neighborhood level of Vancouver, Toronto, and also Montreal. So here the blue color shows neighborhoods that has a higher than average median age. So that's median age decrease. So means that's getting younger. And the yellow color is just average level. And then the orange color shows median age increase more than average. So even within the metropolitan area where we think those places are attracting more younger people and then median age is going down, still there's a lot of communities actually have a lot of people aging in place. And also there's a common myth that population aging and population decline kind of goes hand in hand. So that's one of the first hypotheses that I tested. And based on the municipality level data, there's really no clear linear relationship between population aging, population decline, and population, like a moving of population. So it is not justified to say like population aging really implies something with like population decline or economic decline. So that's really one of the myths that I want to argue against. So the correlation is quite weak to moderate, and even without removing some of the outliers, it's still kind of only a moderate correlation between population decrease and the increase of median age. And that may be leading to some of the remote areas in Canada that has a lot of younger population moved out. So here is a map that try to combine like two, well, like here will be 3 indicators of age, and then map this the phenomena of aging across Canada. So that's the color scheme. Then so it's a color ramp, color value to represent different age compositions. So here the black dot here are the distribution of a percentage of each age group in Canada. And the middle part here is a national average. And each edge is a percentage of population within that age group. So here the magenta color is the younger population, that's from age 0 to age 14. And the light blue color is the population between the age 16 and 64. So that's working age population. And the yellow color is like elderly, as people aged 65 and over. So on the map, based on this color scheme, the pure magenta color it is, the higher percentage of children these places have. And then if the pure yellow that it shows, it means there's the population's highly skewed towards older population. And if it's pure blue color, that means it has high concentration of working age population. And if it's to a gray color, like black gray color, that means it's very close to a national average. So here we can see a lot of parts of BC and even a lot part of remote areas actually have a high percentage of children, and versus in some parts, and especially some part of BC and then the maritime provinces and also the mid part of Ontario has very high concentration of the elderly. So here is a zooming into the southern Ontario. And so Toronto is close to a national average age structure, but with slightly more, the higher concentration of working age population. Versus like close to Hamilton, it's also close to national average, but with slightly higher percentage of children. So based on a study of the age structure and also moving patterns, so one of the findings is the age structures of municipalities are not primarily driven by older adults aging in place. And in fact, there are a high percentage, and here's over 80% of non-movers among the older adults aged 65 and over. So here is a graph showing by different age group the percentage of movers within 5 years. So here you can see when the age gets, so for among the oldest old, so 75 and older, is even higher percentage of people are not moving. So among the 50 to 60 age group, it's about 79% who are non-movers, and then between the age 65 to 75, it's about 83, and also the 75 and over, also about 83 to 84% that stay where they are instead of moving. And even among the movers, a majority are moving within the same municipality. So most people either stay in the same dwelling during the aging process, or they move to somewhere close by, so still within the same municipalities. And there are like a few, so outside of the internal movers, the majority will be urban migrants, so meaning they're moving from one urban area, one metropolitan area to another metropolitan area. So this will be illustrated with a little bit more detail later. So also tracking the OD pairs, so origin destination of movers. I came to this interesting observation that metropolitan areas actually attract large numbers of older adults, so attract them to move in. But however, mostly are outside of Canada. So in Canada, the biggest population, biggest elder movers actually from outside of Canada to metropolitan areas. And also, or like among those, so ignore those foreigners or like older migrants, older international migrants, the majority of movers are actually within the same metropolitan area. So you can see, except for the green highlighted ones that's moving from outside of Canada to some metropolitan areas, the highest frequency is from Toronto to Markham. And then you can see that from Toronto to Lava, from Montreal to Lava, from Toronto to Brampton, from Toronto to Mississauga. So that's actually where most people are moving between and like moving to different places. So here's like a more of a visual representation of where the movers are, where they move to. So that's outside of municipality movers. So what we call is, so that's about the rest 10% of the population. So about 80% stay where they are, about 80% stay where they are, about 10% move within the municipality, and then the rest of 10% will be kind of in this spatial pattern. So you can see it's almost like a constellation of big cities. So if you're zooming in here, it's as shown above, it's between those municipalities within, say, GTA and within Montreal and Vancouver. And most cases actually moving from the central city to the surrounding suburban municipalities. So summarizing these OD pairs and the moving trends, and I can generated a net later life migration spatial pattern. So here, blue color shows basically move out of older people. And then the yellow faint color shows kind of in between. So it's like losing about 100 people and gaining about 100 people. So it's like a neutral trend. And then the red it gets, the darker red it gets, the more attractive to older people these places are. So more older people moving to these orange and red locations. So zooming in to the different municipality areas, so you can see Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto. The central cities in those cases are like have a net out migration of elderly. But in contrast, the surrounding suburban municipalities are gaining a lot of older population. So this is just one cross-sectional year. I also created map from multiple years, even though the pattern switches a little bit, but this general observation stays. So people moving out of central cities and towards like assumingly cheaper, and also places that with better amenities that people are looking for. So in Ontario, it's especially clear. So like that's close to the Neximico, those places, and also this area with a lot of lakes and cottages becoming the places that attract a lot of older people to move in. But however, also, if you remember, the previous observation is still a lot of people outside of Canada moving into the biggest metropolitan areas, and especially like central cities. So it's almost like a little interesting dynamic that international migrants moving into this big metropolitan areas versus older Canadians prefer to move to those suburban areas that's relatively close to central metropolitan cities. And also making a closer observation on this change of living arrangement, change of dwelling types, we do see a strong trend of downsizing. So from the bottom is 55 to 65 age group, and from the up is 75 and older. And between those, so this is an average for all age groups. And this graph shows the between CSD movers. So people move outside of the municipality. And then the top one is the within CSD movers, so the people within the same municipality. So we can see on average, as the age group gets older, more people would choose to move out of just like not stay in single detached house anymore. And there will be stronger, like there's a stronger growth on especially apartments. And this is especially the case among those within municipality movers. So a lot of people are choosing living, like when they live in the same municipality, but considering downsizing the current housing and move out of single detached houses and then to those apartments, and especially like high-rise, mid-rise, and also like low-rise places, and especially in the older age group. So my second research question are looking more at the neighborhood level. So what type of places are aging more substantially? And also how does this change of planning for aging in place vary in different neighborhood contexts? So my key findings are across Canada, there are 4 types of neighborhood with distinct age structures can be identified. And the majority of neighborhoods are now at the mature stage with a high ownership rate and high percentage of non-movers. And these neighborhoods are likely to age more substantially in the coming decades. And the mature stage neighborhoods tend to have relatively high housing affordability and in most car-dependent built environment, while both young and aged neighborhoods have relatively compact built environment and no housing affordability. So here is the age structures at the neighborhood level across Canada. So this analysis is looking at age group by its age group composition, so its percentage of population in each age group at the DA level, which is similar to a neighborhood level across Canada, and then by a cluster analysis, that's the center of the different clusters. So if you take a closer look at the different age structures, it's quite clear that the neighborhoods, there are 4 distinct types of like age types of neighborhood here. So the first one is very high peak around people in the early 20s. And so I just call that young neighborhood. And the second is slightly high peak on the young children, and also the middle age group in their 40s, like 30s and 40s. So I call that the middle stage neighborhood. So that's like young parents and children. And the mature stage neighborhood is concentrated with like 40 and 50 population, and also with sometimes like teenager children. And the aged neighborhood have a high peak around people in the 60s and 70s. So graph plots these neighborhoods across the age and moving pattern. You can see this distinguished quite clearly. So here I have young neighborhoods colored as red, middle stage, the young parents and young children colored as green, and also the mature stage colored as blue, and aged neighborhoods, so older neighborhoods colored as purple. So here it shows the median age, which kind of nicely distinguishes across, like representing the age structure, and also in terms of moving, young neighborhoods have highest percentage of movers, and then the mature stage neighborhood have the highest percentage of non-movers. And also comparing across the different built environment types, we can see the young neighborhoods actually highly skewed towards the more compact environment. So compact here is by the connectivity of streets and also the availability of retail and services. And again, mapping this onto metropolitan areas here, Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal, we can see a very clear spatial pattern of the different age structures within this metropolitan areas. So we see a high concentration of young neighborhoods in the downtown core, and the middle stage neighborhoods in the inner and outer suburbs. And also especially places we can estimate there are significant new developments. And also the mature stage neighborhood, mostly in kind of outer fringe of inner suburbs. So in the suburban and also car-dependent environment. And at the same time, the age neighborhoods really just scattered and spatially mixed with all types of neighborhoods. And comparing the housing characteristics, I do observe a strong and decreasing housing affordability among the younger generation, and also for the older population, like older neighborhoods as well. And in contrast, the mature stage neighborhood tend to be more stable, highest ownership rate, and also relatively higher affordability. So I think that's about my time. Like it's already 40, kind of go over. And so I'll just quickly go through some of the other research questions and key findings that I have. So my third question is looking at, is there a significant gender gap in automobility and also among older adults? And also how does this gender gap vary across cohorts and change over time? Findings are there are significant differences in automobility among older males and older females, and particularly in advanced old age. And yet, a smaller gender gap in automobility can be expected among the baby boomer cohorts, and especially right now in younger groups, we already observe so-called a gender turnaround. So younger females right now actually drive even more than younger males. So here is a graph showing the percentage of staying at home between males and females over the life course. So in the older age and also the old cohorts, we do observe a higher percentage of people staying at home random survey day. And especially for older female, this phenomenon is very shocking. It's almost 45% for the oldest old females to be just staying at home without going outside on the survey day. And also comparing automobility between genders, we do observe drive for women is high in the younger cohorts and younger age, and decreases very substantially in older age. At the same time, females travel as car passengers kind of stable over the life course, with slightly higher among people in the 50s. But in comparison among men, it's almost like consistently high. So on a random survey day, there will be about 80% of men like driving, even though it kind of decreases among older cohorts and among older ages, but still way higher than their female counterparts. But at the same time, most men would not really travel as car passengers. So this is kind of reflecting to some even cultural stigma of the like the association between driving and independence, and then maybe driving and also the sense like it's also very pronounced, especially among males. So the last question, does the level of participation of activities become more polarized between people who travel by car and people who did not travel by car in older age? And what sort of activities are more car dependent for older adults? So my key findings are between car users and non-car users, social participation and the participation in shopping or obtaining services, and active sports and socializing are more polarized in older age. And also, especially shopping and obtaining services show the highest level of car dependency. So here are just some model outputs of the different type of activities across age groups between the car users and non-car users. So car users here are the gray color, and non-car users are the black color. And then the horizontal, the y-axis, showing the probability of participating in this activity. So the first one shows the gap between car users and non-car users in social participation. And the second one shows the gap in socializing. So it's like visiting friends, going to entertainment activities, etc. And the third one showing the gap between the two in active sports. And the fourth one showing the gap between the two groups in shopping and obtaining services. So the observations are, over the life course, car users show higher level of participation in social activities, socializing, and active sports, and also shopping. But wider gaps in older age can be observed among activities such as shopping, social participation, socializing, and also shopping appears to be the most car dependent among these different type of activities. So like just drawing from the different analysis and then just have some insights for planning and discussions. So just a large part of my research is trying to provide some evidence and argue against some of the misleading preconceptions. Some of the preconceptions are, so the aging of population is associated with population decline. So for my analysis, only weak association is found. And the concept that aging in place implies that older people prefer to stay in their homes as long as possible. So that's not necessarily true, even though that's what we usually accept, and that's a general trend. But my argument here is like planning for aging in place really needs to examine to what extent the local environment can support the changing needs of older residents and over the life course. And it is important to recognize this context, and especially the car-dependent context that we cannot really change in, say, like in short time frame, and then still people aging in place at the same time. Then in the policies, what can we do to address those more immediate needs? And also this concept that a more compact built environment is like by default more age friendly. So actually, I do observe no housing ability in observed like in those young and aged neighborhoods, and especially in this compact built environment. So it's very important also for us to look at the financial side, the housing affordability side of if they are age-friendly communities where we think are desirable, and also we really recommend to be applied elsewhere, but then how affordable they are, especially for older adults with lower income. And also this concept that age-friendly communities need to provide transportation options, alternative car for older adults. I do recognize the importance of automobility, and also it's likely to increase among Asian baby boomers. And the planning research here really needs to analyze the potential cumulative disadvantage among non-car users and in a car-dependent environment. So instead of saying that's the primary focus that we should be overcome this car dependency, a stronger emphasis should be on the providing the capacity for non-car use to be able to participate in those different activities. So yeah, thank you very much for your attention, and also looking forward for your questions, comments, and suggestions. And there's some parts that I'm not clear about. I can always go back. I just realized it is a little packed presentation.
You did a little bit look at the differences between the generation. It really is two generations. Us who are baby boomers and our mothers who are living to almost 100. And they're very different. Their expectations are different.
Yeah.
And also their financial issues are different. And for the most part, certainly, my friends who have parents still living in their 90s and over 100. The financial context and the fact that children to support augment and either have housing in their own homes or support them to this institutional living sources really different than what will happen with my peer group who will probably be female, who do not have children who are going to take care of this, not necessarily that they will have them, and who have different expectations and professionals in our old age. We want better. Our parents are
Yeah, so I'm going to repeat the question like much as I can. So the emphasis is on the difference between generations, and especially like baby boomers and the parents of baby boomers, and then the like social and cultural expectations will also be very different between the two. And also you addressed the difference between, say, people with children without like this later life arrangement in terms of expectations, and also the financial resources to support people to age place. So I just wonder, like, do you have a specific argument about it, or like what, or do you have a specific question about it?
I think that the generation that's not quite mobilized.
I see. So it's like basically planning for ahead, like planning, thinking about the baby boomer situation right now, and then not.
Building. They're looking at creating that kind of community living. I guess I was very much touched by it. The people that they built age were parity, and they found that they weren't allowed to build because the community had in place a rule that people of different families could not share accommodation.
I see.
Because they wanted to eliminate rooming houses for students. But they looked at, so they challenged them rights and brought in change. It's just that kind of thinking that the policies of the municipality have not looked at other options about how to share.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a very important point, and I would recap that as like the policy, especially planning policy, to removing the barriers of people like who have more innovative ideas of like aging place. And I did a little bit of research on co-housing. So I wonder, I think in your case, the example will be very similar to a co-housing option. But also it depends, because planning policy in most cases are specific to the municipality, and then they will have their own bylaws or standards about that. But I think you raised an important point that, especially for people who are like me in a planning profession, it is important to even spreading the knowledge of how to find alternative options to aging place. So my personally is like strong supporter for co-housing. I do think that's also an alternative looking at outside of the real estate, like decreasing affordability, and then what we can do for specific group of population that have this like increasing need and also do not necessarily have enough financial resource. but also like, can you give a little bit more detail about the municipality or like specific case this is in? Is that like in a small town, or like they cannot really do the living between different families? Oh, okay, sorry.
And my caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
You want to stay here, if you have any chronic disease, you stay here, your providers, and you, and for the rest of your life, you don't want to switch doctors. If the doctor will take a new patient, and they do have quotas on how many old people, they will take on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Purposely, just using that too much time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's an important point about like aging in place, that stay in the familiar environment as you go. Yeah, I don't have a like direct response to that, but I do agree with your points. I think there's a little. Mhm.
Okay, in my condominium, we started about 2 years ago an aging in place group. I would estimate roughly a quarter of the people in the building are 65 and over. And we've been, the majority of us who are involved in aging in place group have been there up to 20 years, which is the length of life of the condominium building itself. So we're original owners. One of the things that we all of us value about it is that within the building we have connections with young families, and so there's a mixture right through the building of age groups and so on. But so it's been a little bit harder to actually build a focus around aging in place, of getting together, deciding why we get together, what we're getting together for. I think we realize that we need to build the social connections. That isolation can easily happen. We have a number of widows, for instance, moved in as couples and then one has died. And I'm interested that you say that women are the ones who are not going outside their homes, because in fact it's women who are very active outside their homes as volunteers and in the community, much more than the men, visibly, which puzzles me a little. I mean, the men are not living as long, so maybe they're not as visible.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I think the difficulty has been, the thing that we're missing is the services being provided. And I think in buildings where have a direct connection with an agency like Dixon Hall, services are part of the contract between buildings. With privately owned condominium building, you can't have that kind of connection. But Dixon Hall have actually offered us to offer case management to the group as a whole and to individuals who would like to have that, to help us access resources within, because things are changing very rapidly in that. And this has been named by everyone in our group as the most difficult area. Is accessing resources in a timely way. Knowing many of us have families who don't live anywhere near Toronto, so we don't have family backup to look after us in times of illness or whatever. And mostly because we're older, not able to help each other extensively.
Like the energy.
So we need outside resources to make it workable.
Yeah, I think that's, and also that has been a focus on the like aging place literature, and I think you also heard about like the concept of NORC, naturally occurring like retirement communities, and so that's also one of the focus to like aging community. So and emphasize about community support, and a lot is about the volunteer organizations, or like sometimes just like a membership based groups to connect different services and to build almost like communication group that can like refer, say someone need transportation accommodation, and then you'll be able to work together to get this service in place. And also I feel that this is almost like more possible because like in your case in the condominium building, and there are more elderly people live close by, and then such support is feasible. But say in a more lower density area, such as in the remote area, that's even be more challenging. But also addressing your point about like females versus males. So like that graph is from the General Social Survey about going outside on a random day. So I think in terms of participating, especially social participation, volunteering, females do have higher involvement. But then if looking at on a random day of just going outdoors, that men may be just like going for us, like they're more like say outgoing rather than women may be more involved. And also there is a real difference between like especially at a like later age, and because a lot like well, the percentage of female in older age is much higher than the percentage of male, and then percentage of women living in chronic conditions, living with mobility disabilities, will also be higher than men. So on the population, I think like as if women are more like immobile than men.
Yeah, thank you.
uh,
I'm seeing a troubling trend for the future in my central Toronto neighborhood of boomers and their parents. Over 30 years ago as a family. So the millennials and Gen X's that are moving in now, instead of moving into some bungalows, 2-story, a few semis, they are and renovating within the house and the footprint of the house and the yard. They're knocking down basically all the bungalows to the sidewalls and building 3-story boxes. So if those families were to stay as long as I have, 30 years from now, they're going to have a huge house to be a couple or single within that house. So the physical size of the housing in the neighborhood is changing in a way that some of them are putting in elevators. They're going to be more bathrooms, and also in some ways there will be accessibility. And I have upstairs and downstairs washroom. So that's my issue at the moment. But they're just the equivalent of a monster home in an established neighborhood that people age into that much bigger. So just as the suburban people have built large homes. So that's an issue that I think young families, if they wish to stay, will have to deal with much more than mine.
Yeah, but thank you. So the question is about the this housing size and also the different generation of like younger young families versus like mature households like the. Yeah. So.
Sometimes
Yeah. Yeah. So it's almost saying that in Toronto there's a there's a densification trend with larger house sizes. So I'll just recap for some of the findings here. So I do see that trend to be very pronounced, especially in this mature stage neighborhood. So that's mostly in the outer suburbs, and also like in more of the, it's more pronounced in those remote areas. And those places tend to be baby boomers, and a lot of them are kind of just so what we call empty nesters. So like the children's all moving out. They're like older couple aging in place with a large house, and those so that's especially with the housing affordability. So that's like the same story on the other side. That housing are getting that there are larger size of house, higher density, and fewer people living then, and also decreasing affordability at the same time. So for younger families, I do not necessarily see that as a biggest issue when it comes to aging in place, because younger families do tend to like they move more frequently than like say mature stage neighborhoods. And also right now in the older age, we do see a trend of downsizing. That's quite clearly. So even say in a 5-year time frame, people are not really moving that much. But at one point, at one life stage, when the housing is not really suitable for the needs, like such arrangement, like such changes are happening. So say at one point, if the empty nesters, baby boomers, suddenly think they want to move to a bungalow in a nicer place with lakes, like in cottages, they would choose to do so. However, I think a bigger concern here is the fact that if you have a house like in remote areas, then it's almost no other alternative for you to downsize, because there's no such apartments, especially such service like assisted apartments available. And also based on the equity of the housing, it's difficult to replace that with any other type of housing. But the difference is if you have a house like single detached in downtown Toronto, then you have all the financial means to even do like a reverse mortgage or like all the other things to use this equity. And then accommodate the different alternatives, different options that you have for your later life. So sorry, that's kind of a reminder of me. It's already over time. But thank you so much for being here and raising the interesting questions. And do let me know if you want to talk more or like any other questions. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to let JieLan go because she has a deadline at 4 o'clock of a grant application. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And I hope to see you next week as well. Bye-bye.